Okay, so have you ever stopped to think that the English you're hearing me speak right now might be more than just a language? What if it was actually the subject of an ancient prophecy? Well, today we're unpacking a really fascinating source that makes that exact claim. The idea is that English wasn't an accident. It was deliberately designed to be the final, unifying tongue for all of humanity. So how do they even begin to build that case? Let's find out.
All right, so the source really doesn't pull any punches. Right out of the gate, this is the central claim, and it is incredibly bold. And notice the language here. It's not presented like, hey, here's a theory. Nope, it's stated as a foundational truth. This one idea is basically the engine driving this entire argument we're about to get into. So you gotta ask, right? Where does a conclusion this powerful even come from? Well, the source attributes this whole framework to the teachings of a modern spiritual figure it names Lord RayEl. So let's break down the reasoning provided, and we're going to start at the very beginning, with the roots of the language itself. Okay, so the story here starts way back in the distant past. The source claims that English, well, it wasn't some kind of accident. It's actually the result, the culmination of thousands of years of development. You see, it's soaked up key elements from all these ancient, powerful languages. We're talking Egyptian, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Germanic. And according to this viewpoint, that rich heritage, totally not random. It was all part of a deliberate, really long-term design. All right, so after laying that historical groundwork, looking at its ancient roots, the source then jumps forward to the modern world. And now, the case it builds isn't based on ancient history, but on what it calls cold, hard data about just how unique English is today. So, let's take a look at that evidence. The first piece of evidence they put on the table is just a number, 350 million. And what is that? Well, according to the source, that's how many people speak English as a second language. That's more than any other language on the entire planet. And think about that for a second. This isn't about the language you're born with. It's about the one people all over the world are actively choosing to learn, just so they can connect with everyone else. But the argument goes way beyond just counting speakers. As you can see, English has this absolutely massive global footprint. The source points out how it just dominates global publishing. It's the go-to language for international travel. It's the language of international business. It's basically the undisputed operating system for the entire planet's communication.
Okay, now we get to what the source calls its most important piece of evidence. And it's all about the sheer size of the English vocabulary. We're talking about roughly 250,000 distinct words. That makes it one of the largest toolkits of words on the planet. But, the argument isn't just, hey, it's big. The real question is, what does all that size actually do? What does it enable?
Now here it is. This is the crucial connection the source makes. The whole argument is that a bigger vocabulary isn't just about knowing more words. It's about having the right tools for more nuanced, more complex thoughts. It literally fuels creativity and innovation. And then the text makes this incredibly bold historical leap. It suggests this linguistic advantage is one of the main reasons the Industrial Revolution kicked off in English-speaking countries like Britain and America.
So, okay, let's take stock. We've got global dominance, we've got a massive vocabulary that supposedly sparks innovation, and according to the source, none of this just happened by chance. These aren't happy accidents. No, they're seen as evidence of a plan, which, of course, brings us right back to that huge central claim. How on earth does all of this connect to an ancient prophecy?
And this is where the argument takes a really sharp turn. We're moving from the historical and the statistical straight into the theological. The source claims that the rise of English wasn't an accident, not at all. Instead, it argues the language was deliberately planted and spread across the entire globe for one specific purpose, to fulfill a prophecy from the Bible.
And this is it. This is the prophecy in question. It's from the biblical book of Zephaniah. The source points to this verse and says that English is this foretold pure language. The idea is that it's spread across the world as the actual mechanism to unite all of humanity so that everyone can serve a higher purpose with one consent. Or, you could say, with one single voice.
But believe it or not, the argument goes even deeper. It moves past global statistics, it moves past biblical verses, and it goes to a much, much more fundamental level. The source proposes that the ultimate proof, the smoking gun of English's divine purpose, is actually encoded into the very building blocks of the language, the letters of the alphabet themselves.
And this is just a fascinating final layer to this whole thing. The source is basically asking us to completely rethink the alphabet, to look at it in a new way. What if What if each letter isn't just a symbol for a sound? What if it's more like a little container, holding a primal, ancient meaning that's been carried forward through thousands of years of history?
Okay, let's actually look at the system the source lays out here. So what it does is assign a core, primal meaning to every single letter, and these are supposedly derived from ancient pictograms. So for example, just look at the first row. The letter A is said to come from the symbol for an ox, which represents strength. Then B comes from a house, meaning shelter. C is from a hunting stick, and D from a door or a passage. And what's really interesting is that the source also connects these original meanings to the modern military alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, arguing that those original meanings have been preserved all this time.
Let's dive into a few more examples from this symbolic system. So you've got the letter M, with its kind of wave-like shape, which is said to represent water. Makes sense. Then T is interpreted as a cross or a twist, and S is linked to the shape of a tooth, which symbolizes support or structure. The core idea here is that every single letter we write is carrying a little piece of this ancient symbolic puzzle.
Now, some of these connections are a bit more abstract. For instance, you take the letter Y, with its arms reaching up towards the sky. Well, that's equated with a single, pretty powerful concept: light. And then, to wrap up the alphabet, you have the final letter Z. It's given the meaning of an axe or a weapon. A symbol of cutting, of division, or maybe just a definitive end.
All right, so let's just pull all of this together and recap the complete argument. The whole case is really built on 4 distinct pillars. First, you've got the undeniable massive global reach of English. Second, there's the idea that its huge vocabulary is a major driver of innovation. Third, the claim that all of this is actually fulfilling a specific biblical prophecy. And finally, the belief that the ultimate proof is hidden in the very DNA of the language, the letters of the alphabet.
So there you have it. That is the complete argument from the source material. And, whether you find it compelling or not, it definitely leaves us with a pretty provocative question to think about. How does it change your perception of language if you start to see it not just as a tool we use to talk, but as the fulfillment of a destiny? What hidden meanings might be lying dormant in the words you and I speak every single day?